All right. Well, thank you so much and welcome to the Friday Morning Book Group. Thank you all for being here. I so appreciate it. So this month we are going to discuss American Baby, a mother, a child, and the shadow history of adoption. So I would just like to start with my usual brief introduction to the author for the new people. I usually give a little introduction to the author, and then I give a little bit of an overview of the book. So Gabrielle Glaser, and I'm quoting from Miss Glaser, says that she's a writer who challenges the conventional wisdom on subjects that broadly touch people's lives. Over decades of work as a journalist and author, I have examined how accepted principles in one era had unexpected and often devastating consequences in the years that followed. And I think that certainly rings true for this book. So her previous book was called Her Best Kept Secret, Why Women Drink and How They Can Regain Control. It was a New York Times bestseller. I had never heard of it until I read about her. And apparently she slams AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and says that it is actually harmful to women. So I'm kind of interested in that book now to read it. But she is a professor of journalism, and says she's a professor at the University of Southern California. She's reported from all over the world: Poland, Yugoslavia, from Rio at the Olympics. She actually grew up in Oregon, and she has a degree in history from Stanford. So she's quite accomplished. So back to the book. So just a little overview. I'm sure you all read it. And again, as I always tell the group, if you haven't finished the book, or even if you haven't read it, you're always welcome to come to the group. But just a little overview anyway. So Gabrielle met David Rosenberg when she was writing an article about his kidney transplant. And this evolved into him expressing his wish to connect with his birth mother, which he had been thinking about for quite a while. And this started Glaser on her research of the shadowy adoption system in the US in the mid-century. And it made the story very personal. She made the story very personal as she centered it around the one teenager, Margaret Earl. And you may remember another book we read about sort of like this called Inheritance by Danny Shapiro. And this was also a DNA memoir. It was a very different format, but it was also about separation and eventual reunion between an adopted child and birth parents. So there's lots.
What's the name of the book?
The name of the book was Inheritance.
Oh, right.
That wasn't adoption. That was artificial insemination.
Yeah, you're right. Excuse me. It was DNA, a DNA story.
Right.
It wasn't adoption. I used the wrong word. Sorry. But this book is obviously a totally different format, but I was just bringing out the idea of looking for your roots, basically. And so in this book, there's lots to discuss, including the politics, the culture, and the economics of the era, and how this all affected the number of births and the adoptions. So it really struck me how in that era, premarital sex and infertility, premarital sex was shamed, and infertility was such a taboo topic of conversation. And this was like a perfect storm. Oh, here's Rosalind. Let me let her in. This made for such a perfect storm of convenience for these dishonest and unethical adoption agency people. And they just wanted to make money and take advantage of these unsuspecting young women. So really, in the end, this was really a human rights story, and it affected generations of mothers and babies, and it's just so tragic. And she brought out so much about this story that I really didn't know about. I was bowled over. So I now open it up to you guys, and our format is generally we go around the room and everybody gets a chance to speak. You don't have to speak. You can contribute if you want to. We're happy to hear what you have to say. So you just raise your hand and I call on you, and we have a nice discussion. So who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
Oh, okay, Judy.
I had the same reaction to the book as you did. I was just bowled over by the greed of these people just wanting to make money. Many years ago, I was in summer camp, and one of the girls in my bunk says to the other one, you know, there's somebody in my high school who looks just like you. Well, it turned out that they were twins and had, just like they said in the book, and they separated them. And the girl that we knew, her parents had actually wanted to take both girls, and the agency said, no, no, you can't do that. So it was obviously they were trying to do this research. So, you know, when I read about, I think the guy's name was Karolitz, who did the research on the twins and triplets, I thought, oh boy, that's what this agency was after, feeding him another case. And then my husband has a friend whose older sister got pregnant, and her mother forced her to go away someplace. And who knows, maybe this was in New York, maybe it was that place on Staten Island, I don't know. Yeah. And they forced her to give up the baby. And till the day her mother died, she really held it against her that she had forced her to do that. So, you know, as I was reading all this stuff, I said, oh boy, the problem was bigger than the few cases that I know about.
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed it. It was a page turner.
Yes, yes. Oh, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Judy, for your thoughts. Thank you. All right. Who else? Tanya.
Well, this book really related to my life too, because as you know, I'm a survivor. And after the war, I was living in a DP camp, which is a displaced person camp, and that was called Landsberg, and it was very close to the Dachau camp, the concentration camp, and I knew exactly what they were writing about, and it was amazing the way she described it, which I went through the whole war, and of course, and you could understand her mother, you know, how hard she what kind of a life she had, but what I was very much impressed is by the adoption of David, you know, Stephen, he changed to David, of course. Yeah. The parents were also survivors, yeah. And they weren't sure whether they'll have a child. They couldn't have, you know, they didn't have children, obviously, and how loving family it was, and the way they brought him up, and he was a very happy child. But of course, I could understand Margaret's feeling. The child vanishes without her knowing where it is, and all her life she's kind of researching for it. I was very much taken by the book, and I loved it, and I thank you again for choosing it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tanya. Appreciate your thoughts. Thank you. Wonderful. All right. Who else would like to speak? Oh, Harriet.
Well, one reason Judy invited me is because I am one of those adopted children. Oh. And recently I found my paternal family. My paternal father is, my biological father is deceased, but I have 3 half sisters, which has been nice to connect to. And one thing that sort of struck me about the book is that I had no idea how many children were involved. I mean, when I grew up, actually in my neighborhood, there were 3 other adopted children besides me.
Yeah.
So we just kind of thought it was normal,
Yeah.
basically.
Can I ask you where you grew up?
Ohio.
Ohio. Okay.
Yeah, Steubenville, Ohio. And so, you know, of course, when you're riding your bike up and down the street, you don't think, oh, gee, that's a lot of adopted children. You know, I wonder how many million of them are out there.
Sure.
But one interesting thing is that I do have, I did get a match for my biological mother, and that person on Ancestry, and that person did not reply. I don't think that that part of the family knew of my existence, whereas my biological father's family did. And so there's so many, I won't go into any more details, but there are just so many stories, and the story in the book, plus the facts that, you know, I had no idea of the treatment of these young women back then. And so it was a very interesting book, and also brought up a lot of the issues with the adoptees,
Sure.
which I think are pretty common and pretty universal, not just to David
Sure.
and the others that she went into. So it was fascinating, well worth reading.
Wow. Well, you know, I really appreciate your being here and sharing your feelings, because I'm sure that can't be easy. And thank you so much. Thank you, Harriet. I
Yeah,
hope.
and I also, my adopted family was also very wonderful.
Oh, good.
So I had a great childhood.
Yeah. How old were you when you were adopted?
3 days.
3 days. Oh.
Yes, and I felt very lucky. I felt so bad for the children who they put through those experiments to find out their personalities. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was horrifying. So at least I wasn't, you know, I was scooped up pretty fast.
Yeah.
And I was also told from a very early age that I was adopted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. That's, I guess in the big scheme of things, you were one of the luckier ones in the big scheme.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these other kids, right? Wow. Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. I hope you enjoy the session, and I hope you come back. Thank you. All right. Yeah, Anne.
I have a sister who had a baby out of wedlock. She was 19, and she gave the baby to New England Home of Little Wanderers. And he'd be 53. And she passed away at the age of 70 of anorexia. And she never talked about it. And I mean, I saw the baby because it was in Boston. And I got a babysitter, and I went in to the nursery at BLI and looked at the baby and came home, and that was it. And I recently asked my niece, who would be the half sister, if she had any interest in finding him. And she said, no, it might be terrible. And I would love to, but it's not my place. But I would really like to know what happened to him. And
He's your nephew.
yeah, be my nephew. The other thing is, so many of the things in the book, we have read other books like The Orphan Train.
Yeah.
And the book about the woman in the South, somewhere north of South Carolina, who stole babies and sold them. Joan Crawford bought one. And then there was there was a documentary on the triplets the boys, they lived near one another. They put one in a Catholic home, one in a Protestant, and one in a Jewish home.
Right.
And one of those boys ended up committing suicide. But I think it was the one that Margaret's son went to. I think it was that place. But,
I think it was too. It was the same agency.
right, same agency. But
Wow.
the history was fascinating from, the orphan train to the stealing and to foreign adoptions. I mean, those people probably can never find their biological parents. It was Korean, the GIs got a girl pregnant. She was ostracized. And the other thing is the culture. They lost all their culture, unless there are groups who get together who have Asian people and try to produce some culture, but it's not the same.
You're right. It's difficult.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Anne. Thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
All right. I think Megan had her hand up.
Okay, thanks, Deb. Thank you for picking this book. I saw your note come through on a Monday, and I ran to get it because I guess I've just been so busy with my kids. I didn't see the previous ones, and I read it in 2 nights, which is my record. I couldn't put it down. I really loved it, and it's funny when you read a book and you know what's going to happen, but you still want to see how. I was blown away. I'm a lawyer. I'm a mom of 2 boys, and we adopted a girl a little over a year ago from foster care. And I just wanted to say, I think one great thing about this country is we do get books like this that expose what happened in the past. The one thing so I loved it, clearly, and I have a friend who went through this. My friend Mary was one such child who was adopted and had to find the birth parents because of all the secrecy. But on page 277 of my copy, which is just like the Belmont Library copy, she gets into foster care. And I did want to just say a quick note about it because that's where we came into adoption. I feel like there's a pendulum with adoption, right? Like there's completely unethical, and then there's like, we're going to do so much to keep the birth parents in the picture that it's almost unethical for the child. And what I mean by that is, so we currently in our state have 5,500 children waiting to be adopted in foster care. And my husband and I, we had our birth sons, and then we decided to adopt. We were so excited about it. The little girl we adopted, because there's 2 years in Massachusetts where a birth parent can reunite and show that they're, these are children who were in the system because of abuse and neglect, severe abuse and neglect. So during the time, our daughter, before she came to us, she was in 14 homes. And finally, they had no more homes for her to go to as the parents tried to show that they weren't going to be abusive and go through counseling and get jobs. They put her in a hospital for 2 weeks, and then they put her in a group home for troubled children, at which point the social worker in DCF went rogue and said, this little girl is awesome. She doesn't deserve one more home unless it's an adoptive home. And one night she and I met because my husband and I were trying to adopt, and we got our Allie, and she's awesome. And so when Gabrielle Glaser talks on page 277 about foster care and you can't criminalize poverty, I do agree with that statement, but I think that there's a lot of awesome work being done in our state in foster care in a lot of states. So I just wanted to share that one bit.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your sharing of your own personal, experience. And all of you, everyone has personal experiences. And I know it's not easy to share that. So
How old is she?
appreciate it.
Yeah, we got her 5.5. She just turned 8. See if I can pull up a little picture. And I just, again, my goal is to, here she is for St. Patrick's Day. This is our little nugget. She's dressed as a leprechaun. That was yesterday. But actually we keep in touch with all the birth kids. She's one of 5. There's her siblings, kind of hard to see on the phone, but she's one of 5. And I guess my goal is just, oh, here's all three of mine. So they kind of look alike, even though they're not related. But just, I hope people don't read this book and think, oh, adoption is just so unethical, I couldn't do it today. Because I think there are, in this state, in this country, there's a lot of people making it ethical and awesome again.
Yeah, well, things have changed quite a bit. Thank God people like Governor Lehman no longer around. I mean, to think that the governor of New York put in place a law because his 3 adopted children, he didn't want them to contact their birth parents. He put in place a law to seal birth certificates for his own personal family, not to access their birth family. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. So things like that happened back then, and thank God things have changed and are still changing. So this is good.
Well, now there's birth control and abortions, so that there aren't as many kids available either.
That's right. But
Babies. There are kids, but not babies.
yeah, and unfortunately, you know, people are trying to change laws and make us go backwards now, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. So we have to be very vigilant. Anyway, that's another story. But Joanna.
Yeah, I enjoyed the book too. About 16 years ago, I mentored a teenager, and she got pregnant. She was a senior, and her family threw her out. So she lived here, and we were going through the process of what was she going to do. She wanted to go to college. She wanted to do things. And it's interesting, the school system had a special nurse that really went through it with her and gave her options. You know, it was a very different scenario that went through it with her and myself. And the idea of adoption was given, and we were given pictures to looking at families. She didn't know what she wanted to do, but the fact is she thought it through, and I would support her. And the school nurse privately said to me, you know what, Joanna, you're doing the adoption. They keep their babies, which is interesting. This was 16 years ago. The nurse said, don't be surprised. I'm thinking, why would she do it? She said, no. Long story short, she did keep the baby, brought up the child. Family took her back because it was a boy and they only had girls. They brought her back. She's a nurse. She went to school. She lived with her family. Happy ending. But it is interesting that I think it depends on the circumstances too. And this is 16 years ago that she wasn't told she had to. She was given options, and that the nurse, and she had a lot of support in her life.
Yeah.
And now it's so interesting. I see pictures, and now she's happy, and her son is in high school, and it was a choice.
Yeah.
People should be given choices.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, a great example. Thank you. Thank you, Joanna, for sharing that. Thank you. I know Richard had his hand up for a while.
Oh, fine.
I won't be long. I really enjoyed the book. It felt like I was reading fiction, even though it was nonfiction.
Yeah, right. It reads like fiction.
I read it in a few days myself, and I finished it last night. I thought the book was a race against time because of, all these people, particularly the men, dying. So many of them dying prematurely, and Margaret just made it in time to see David. I mean, basically, it was only a few months that she really got to see him, and she regrets she didn't see him longer, but she might have not seen him at all if it hadn't been for that connection with the aunt. And could have very easily, she gave up after that reception at the agency when they said, we're going to call the police if you don't leave. She thought that was it.
Yeah.
She didn't realize all that was happening. I to me, the main reason I read the book was because adoption hit home to me. My brother has 3 adopted children. Basically because his wife had lupus and she's in remission, but she couldn't have kids. So they decided to adopt. And all the 3 kids, they were all very well behaved. 2 of the 3 kids have the same birth mother. But one thing that we didn't discuss, I want to bring this up. One of my concerns, even though the adoption and all the horrible things we were reading about, is through the whole time, the secret part, I kind of see the point of it, because what happens if the kid wants to leave or to go back to the regular parents? That's the big thing I was thinking about when my brother and sister-in-law, after the time passed, they're going to go back and want to leave my brother's parents and go back to their own parents if it's more known. I don't know, what do people think of that?
I think it's okay, Richard.
Okay.
Depending on the circumstances. With my daughter, the parents had a trial. They didn't show up for it. For a year and a half, they were visiting the kids. And then the state said, we don't see sufficient progress. These kids need homes. We're changing the goal from reunification to adoption. At that point, they became upset and never showed up again. So my daughter was waiting when she was 5 years old on her 5th birthday for them to come get her, and they never came. And that was her last sort of time that she would have had an interaction with them. So we've always kept it. And then so there was a hearing, they didn't come. There was a termination of parental rights. They didn't appeal it. The lawyers were contacting them constantly. We've always said to our daughter, we've had her now since November of 19, if you want to be in touch, especially when you're older, we're fine with it. We can help you with that. They're on Facebook. She knows that. I think in your case, though, or the case that you're talking about, if there wasn't harm at all, if it was just like different circumstances, I think it's okay to know. But I'm no expert. I'm just giving you my little tidbit of what I've seen,
Well, so now my brother's kids are pretty much adults. Vivian's the youngest. She's born in 2004. So she'd be 18 this year. So here are pictures of them, if you can. That's about 10 years ago, 9 or 10 years ago. Met at the ice thing in Boston on New Year's Day. What happened with my brother's kids is 2 of the 3, Vivian and Daniel was born the 1st and Vivian the 3rd, was the reason they decided to take Vivian as their 3rd. It turns out both Daniel and Vivian both had the same birth mother. And the tricky part is, I guess it's done more now, is telling the kids they're adopted. And they didn't tell them right away, but what happened was Daniel, I think, saw his mother, and after he got out of the bathroom, he said, Mom, Vivian has the same eyes as I do. And that's when Lisa said to them, well, both, she's adopted and they both had the same birth mother. That's when she let him know. But I grew up with a roommate, became a friend for a while, whose brother was much older. Brother would now be probably in his 70s. The daughter didn't know at least till she was bar mitzvah that she was adopted. They didn't tell her.
I'm sure
I
that's
don't know.
more common than you think. I'm sure it is, but.
And my cousin, I have a cousin, first cousin I'm close to, also adopted. They had more problems with the adopted kids. One, Matthew, has been in jail quite a bit. He's done better now. And the other one was in jail, and she's had a successful career, but they had more difficulty raising. I guess the stigma when I was growing up was that, if he's adopted, they're adopted. They're problem children or something like that. It's not true, but I think that used to be the stigma.
Maybe.
And I had another friend who I was friends for quite a while. Then I saw him when he got married. I didn't know till 11 years after that he was adopted. His wife that he married mentioned it in conversation. So he never told people or didn't want to tell people.
Well, I think people's feelings and people's reactions are really very broad. But thank you, Richard. Thank you so much for your thoughts. I appreciate it. Does anybody else wish to talk? Who hasn't? Rosalind.
Well,
Rosalind, you have to unmute.
that I thought the book was masterful, the way it interwove the nonfiction, social science, all the research with the drama. And I thought in the acknowledgement, she said how much Margaret remembered everything in detail. And, you know, that's so true of trauma, that you do remember maybe what you're wearing, where you were standing and things like that. But I can't come on it in a couple of ways. One is that I actually have evaluated a lot of foster children who come from abroad, and the parents don't really know anything about their health usually, where they were found. And so a lot of times the school psychologist is actually called in to do an evaluation to see what might be going on. And, you know, I've had experience, very positive ones with families, and it's really worked out. And you find out the parents are very appreciative of any evaluations. I've also noted my own personal experience growing up in a foster home myself, that there are a lot of children out there whose parents don't want to give you up, but they don't want to take care of you. So you're sort of, there's a lot of children who are in tremendous limbo. And I was thinking, also, as I was reading the book, I was just thinking of those 1,600 children who were moved from Ukraine to that Warsaw hotel, and what's going to happen to all those foster children who are also in limbo, and what will be. I've also known other families have tremendous trouble raising their kids, and like some of the children with attention deficit disorder, parents who feel that their children aren't meeting their expectations. So, you know, it's not always a happily ever after situation. But, you know, I think that the hardest thing is when you are in a foster home, but your parents won't give you up. They want to cling on to you in some way, although they don't want to care for you.
Yeah.
There are a lot of children in that situation.
I guess the parents think that they're going to reform and get the children back. Is that the
well, I think that they think there's change, and they think, oh, there's a stigma to give them up. But actually the better thing, if they can't care for them for so many years and the child is older, it's very hard to get children adopted who are much older. And usually that's a situation they've gone in back to their parents and then taken back. And it can be a very sad situation with very foster parents who aren't really qualified to care for children too. And finding good foster families to carry over is a hard thing. And I have a friend who was a social worker, and she quit. She became a school psychologist in a school system, because she couldn't tolerate the unhappiness of placing children in poor foster care. So, you know, that's also another side. But it's so inspiring to hear about children who have been adopted and how it's worked out. But I thought that overall that the author could interweave the detail that she went into and where she went around the world to find the story was extremely impressive.
Yeah, she's quite an investigative journalist. I mean, I felt like the detail was incredible, weaving it into the story and making it a page turner, like you guys said. So, but that's fascinating. I appreciate your insight, Rosalind. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. So who hasn't spoken? Irene.
This was a very interesting book because I grew up in New York City. And when I was a teenager, I went to some sort of an event at the New York Foundling Hospital. And they were saying, and they showed us the children or something like that in nursery. And, you know, they were always looking for volunteers to come in and take care of the babies. And I was thinking at the time, well, if they're going to adopt them, they shouldn't be here that long. And I wasn't really interested in babies at that point. So, but, over the years, I've known people who have been adopted or who have adopted children. I had a friend in college who on her 21st birthday, her parents told her she was adopted.
Whoa.
That was the first time they ever told her.
Wow.
And, she came to me and said, I'm adopted. And I thought, big deal. And then I found out later it was a big deal because she had no idea. And this was just sort of dropped on her.
Oh.
I had friends who, 40, 50 years ago had adopted children. And when the law was going to change in Massachusetts, when they were talking about it, she was very much opposed to, the children being able to know who their parents were. She, I think, felt threatened by that. My younger daughter had a friend who was adopted, and I don't think her adopted parents were particularly great, but she was sort of in touch with her other siblings. It was a very mixed up situation. So it's a very complex thing. It was sort of nice to read about David, that he had good adopted parents, that he was, came from an Orthodox family. He went to an Orthodox family. And even though he had, good, loving parents and he loved them, he was still having difficulty with it. So I thought it was an excellent book. I, could trace it for 50 years or more,
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Irene, for your thoughts. Appreciate that. And I'm glad you enjoyed it. Seems like everybody enjoyed it. I'm very glad. Thank you. Well, Judy Wolf, did you want to speak?
I thought it was a marvelous book, extremely moving. And a couple of things struck me. One was, thank God, we have become a more compassionate society.
Thank God.
Not just because children need to know medical problems, but because they have the right to have information about themselves. And I think that's an extraordinarily important right for them to have. I'm a little horrified because I did in fact know Louise Waterman Wise, and she became a judge and was highly regarded and respected. And I cannot understand, and she was a champion of civil rights. I cannot understand how she possibly tolerated what happened in this orphanage. And the story we just heard of using to permit twins to be united. These are
Greed.
horrible.
Wow. So you actually knew her. Wow.
And I was so stunned that I wrote to a friend, is this the same person we knew?
Wow. Yeah.
But it showed this look, within our lifetime, this country has shown a greater sense of justice and compassion, but we have to admit there's a long way to go.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Well, thank you so much, Judy. Wow, it just shows you can't always know a person. My goodness, I mean, people are so complicated. Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you. Well, I think we've heard from everyone. Did anybody have
No.
anything else?
No, we haven't. We haven't heard from iPad, from Arnie.
Oh, I'm sorry. Arnie, my mistake. My mistake. Arnie,
Uh-huh.
would you like to
Okay.
speak?
Sure. Do you want me to hit the mute? Oh, am I on right now?
You're good.
Yes.
You're perfect.
Yeah.
You're
Okay.
perfect.
Well, I'm widowed. My wife passed away 5 years ago. I have my older daughter's living with me with her 2 children. She's adopted over 30 years ago. And we sought out, we told her she was adopted from as soon as she understood, which was about 1.5 to 2 years old. We got her at birth. And as a matter of fact, I was in the birthing room when she was born, both my wife and I. And she's had contact with her uncles, and they were just wonderful people in Florida. And we have, and she's had contact with another one of her uncles who's a social worker, and as a matter of fact, he's been up here to visit. And she's had some actually wonderful contact. She actually was able, she couldn't contact her birth mother had passed away from, well, overdose of alcohol and drugs in a trailer camp somewhere in West Virginia. And the birth father is technically unknown. But she's gone down and visited with, she has half brothers down there, twins that she's visited. And she said, and she still has contact on Facebook, and she calls them periodically. And she has 2 of her own children living with me now, a 10-year-old in the 4th grade and a 3-year-old about to go to preschool. And I have a younger daughter who I adopted. It was an interfamily adoption. My wife's niece was sort of a troubled kid, and when she got pregnant, the first time we offered to take the child, and she had that aborted. And then she got pregnant a second time. We were a little hesitant, but we said okay, and we adopted my younger daughter, actually through the state of California. And we went out there when she gave birth, and then we brought my younger daughter back. And subsequently, our niece overdosed, and she left us in 2005. But I have, and my younger daughter, she was a special ed in school, and she had some issues, and she fell into substance abuse. And but when she got pregnant, she was living here, and she gave birth at 15, and this wonderful little child. And unfortunately, she overdosed, and they revived her with 2 shots of Narcan and oxygen. But DCF brought the little baby, brought the little guy to me. He was almost 4. And I've had him ever since. I have guardianship of him, March of 2019. And currently I'm in the process of adopting him. And she hasn't seen him in a year. When you speak of foster care, I dealt with DCF. I also worked for Family and Children's Services in one of my early jobs many years ago. And I can't recall the woman's name, but she's so right. Getting foster care, getting good foster care is really, really difficult. I'd say about 1/3 of the foster parents were actually competent and could handle children. And the vast majority, from my perspective, were in it just for the meager funds that DCF provided. I had instances where the child was in foster care, wonderful family, and they refused to adopt the child. And then I had foster parents that should never have been foster parents, and I had it reunified with the birth parents. Part of the job was really great. I visited kids in Nazareth and down at the home in Fall River. You know, I get down and have lunch with the kids. It was a great job. Unfortunately, the money was so small. I just couldn't afford to stay in it. But with respect to myself, I mean, you know, here I am. I'm almost an octogenarian, and I'm raising a 7-year-old. And so some of the difficulties of the system, in terms of, it's so difficult for some of these social workers to place some of these children. And there's more now because of the drug situation in people on substance abuse that have children, and DCF puts them at the foster care. It's overburdened. I don't know the solution, but from my own perspective, you know, I have, you know, 2 wonderful adoptive children despite the substance abuse, and I just feel very lucky that I have my grandchildren in my house with me at this point in my life. It's a lot of grandparents never see their grandchildren, and as an adoptive parent, I feel pretty fortunate.
Yeah, a silver lining. So, well, wow, that's quite a story, Arnie, and quite a lot to share. And I appreciate you sharing your feelings. And thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I haven't read the book. Mind you.
That's okay. As I tell
You can write the book.
you don't always have to read the book to come
Write
to
enough
my
book, yeah,
group.
right.
To come to my group. I do apologize, but we're running up to the hour. And I know we could probably talk for another hour, but I do apologize. I need to start to close. If you have a quick comment, Rosalind and Joanna, is it a quick comment?
I just had a quick comment that I would hope that children who do emerge from this kind of care gets the proper evaluations at school. It's very, very important for children who come from families with difficult problems to make sure that they have the assessment for disabilities, for attention deficit. There's a lot of connection between attention deficit disorder and drug abuse. And so I think so whoever it is who adopts a child, they should actually seek out the school psychologist to get a really good evaluation.
And a very good point. Thank you, Rosalind. And Joanna, did you have a quick comment? Joanna? No. Oh,
Thank you so much. It was a great discussion.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to
Thank you for all the people who revealed themselves as well. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's not easy to do, and it was very moving. Really, my heart goes out to all of you, and I wish you all the best. I do have a couple of points I forgot to mention in the beginning that I'd like to kind of broadcast. So in April, I'm going to be running the events here, and April is Holocaust Remembrance Month. And so in honor of that, I'm going to be having a speaker on April 25th. It's a Monday night. She is an Auschwitz survivor, and she is going to speak via Zoom about her life before, during, and after the war. She is a wonderful, amazing lady. She's about 90, but she's an amazing speaker. Her name is Magdalena Bader, like the Supreme Court Justice Bader. And you can register for the lecture on our website, just like you register for the book group. And then on Wednesday night, April 27th, I'll be showing a film called Undeniable, The Truth to Remember. You may have seen it on CBS, but it's an amazing film. It's survivors who talk about their experiences, and this one woman who's a survivor who goes into a school in Texas to teach about the Holocaust to students whose school refuses to teach it. So it's very moving. These students are immigrants themselves, and when they hear her story, you can see their tears down their cheeks because they're so moved and aligned by what happened to her, and they relate to it from their own tragedies. So it's a very moving film. And then we'll have displays and whatnot for the month. So that's April 25th and April 27th. If you're interested, you're more than welcome to register for those events. And then April 29th, we'll do the book group, and we're going to read The Maid by Neeta Prose. And this is probably has the most holds of any book in the Minuteman system. But what I did was I was able to ask the friends who very graciously agreed to purchase copies for us. So these copies are like the book Passing, which we did, so they are not barcoded. And when you pick up a copy of The Maid, we ask that you return it to us on the honor system because there's no barcode, so it won't be checked out. And
Is that based on the Netflix show?
I don't know about that.
The Handmaid's Tale, you mean?
No. The Maid. It's about a girl whose boyfriend abuses her, so she runs away and keeps getting jobs as a maid and falls back. And it's not that.
No.
Okay. Who's the author?
Neeta Prose, Nita Prose. So it's a complete 180 from this month. I thought, we'll do something totally different. It's fiction. And I hope you enjoy it. So the books are out right now. You're welcome to come pick up a copy. I do have a limited supply. Unfortunately, they bought me 12 books. So bye, Rosalind. So anyway, that's about it. So thank you all for coming to book group, and thank you all for all your thoughts, and I look forward to seeing you in April.
Deb, I'm sorry, my electrician came, I had to run downstairs. I didn't hear, what is the book for next month?
It's called The Maid, M-A-I-D.
Thanks, Megan, for your
And it's by Neeta Prose, Prose.
Okay, I'll be over to pick one up.
All right, any questions? Everybody good? All right, well, wonderful to see you all, and I hope you all enjoy the beautiful day.
You too.
Bye. You too. Thanks.
Sure, thank you, nice to meet you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.